Good evening, everybody. As far as I know, I should now be live. Everything now says that I'm live and is counting down, and it's a pleasure to be here on the Twinkl group to have a chat to you this evening. Welcome to here. It's a bit unusual. I've got my cup of tea in my Guinness cup. My wife told me not to use one of the nice Sports Direct ones, which are my favourite ones, and to use one of these ones. So here I am transmitting to you live from sunny Johnston. My name is Brian Costello, and I'm the director of Headstrong. And we are a company who do a variety of mental health things. We do a lot of work in schools, obviously, hence the reason for me being here, as well as doing private practice where we help adults, teenagers and children with their mental health challenges, especially anxiety, which I'll speak to you about a little later on. We go into companies, we do training courses, all these different things. But today, obviously, we're here to speak about our young people and what's happening with our young people's mental health at the moment. And what I want to do is I want to give you a bit of a view from our side of what happens, especially with relation to ACEs, and hopefully to be able to give you some tools, some techniques, some understandings. Oh, hang on a second. Everything just disappeared there and I have no idea why. Well, hang on a minute. Very helpfully, somebody is phoning me. Apologies for that. Everything just disappeared there because someone was trying to phone me and it's coming through on my computer. But anyway, hopefully that's the last time for that happening. So we want to give you a bit of an insight, or I want to give you a bit of an insight from inside the mental health profession. This is what we do every single day. We have a practice in Glasgow. We've got a very small, just embryonic practice in Aberdeen that we're just starting up. And I've been working in this field now for now 12 years, in fact, this year. And it'll be coming on 15 years since I first was trained in this. Give you a little bit of background as to how all this came about and how I'm sitting here. I started Headstrong because my wife had gone through a number of mental health issues. And I saw that she'd managed to get some help, and I'd been already trained in the thing that she used to get the help. And I thought, you know what, I want to go out there. I'm going to be a therapist. I'm going to help people with depression. In the back of my head, I always had this thought that I wanted to help young people. And this was not any huge quest in terms of I'm going to help young people, I'm going to transform the nation. To be honest, it was actually a little more selfish than that. I wanted to help me, not me, the 30-odd-year-old that was starting the company, but I wanted to go back and help 16-year-old me who went through school thinking that he was always going to be stuck in a mode of thinking, that my mental health was stuck, that I couldn't find any way out of it. And I went through that for a long period of my life. Many of you might actually have similar experiences. You know, some of you might be listening to this thinking, my God, I still feel like I'm 14 inside my head and I just want everybody to like me. But I went through that. I still do that occasionally. Please like me. But I go through that up until I was 30 when I actually learned all this stuff. And I thought, you know what? If I could just get into a school and teach young people that their mind isn't stuck, that they're never broken, because I thought I was, and I thought that that was just the way it had to be. And that is now my mission and my purpose, is to go out and help teachers, to help young people, to help anyone understand that their mind is not broken. And that's why, as I said to Sarah earlier on, that I'm just hugely excited to be able to speak to you for about half an hour or so. I am more than happy as well to take any questions as we go through today and go through this live, what am I even calling it? I don't know, live event, is that what we call it? And what I want you to do is just, if you leave any questions, I'll be able to see them. So if you see me looking down here, I'm just looking at some of the questions coming through. But I'll speak to you for about half an hour. And then what we'll do is I can have a wee look and see if there's any questions. I won't keep you for very long. So when I started, as I say, I wanted to help people with depression. I also wanted to help myself. But over the last probably about 6 or 7 years, depression has definitely lost a lot of its press. It is, from my perspective now as a professional working in mental health, nowhere near the big news that it was. Now, obviously, and you guys as teachers will definitely know this, it has been hugely overtaken by anxiety. And anxiety is now the buzzword on everybody's lips. Our anxiety and the threshold for it, the ages that we're seeing our young people experience severe anxiety symptoms. And again, many of you I know are primary school teachers. They are getting younger and younger and younger. And that is a worry. That is a real concern. And you guys are at the front end. You guys are right there being able to deal with it. And it's all very good for someone like me to come into the school. We can definitely help. We can plant some messages. It's sometimes nice to hear a different voice saying something different. It's nice for us to come in and back up much of what you're saying. But ultimately, you guys are at the front end. And you guys see these kids every single day. And therefore, if we can just give you some of the skills, some of the understanding that we have, then I'm hoping that it can help. So we've been doing a lot of work in schools recently, and I can see actually that this one of the people who is on just now is going to recognise what I'm going to talk about, because we've been doing a bit of a pilot project recently in one of our local schools in Lochwinnock Primary with Julie Bell and her team there, and we've been getting some amazing results. This isn't massively unusual, I must admit. We've been working in private practice for a long time, but the challenge is in private practice is that not everybody can access us. If you're in a low-income area, and even then not everybody's heard of what we do, then it can be very difficult to access what we do. So we're really encouraged when schools take us on. And what I want to do tonight is to tell you what we actually are doing with those children, and also our children in our private practice. Over the years of working with young people, what I found was that there was some similarities that were happening, especially when we're dealing with anxiety and dealing with ACEs. And we're dealing with anything that we deal with, as far as we're concerned, has its root in some childhood experience. If you came to see me as a teacher, whatever age you may be, from 24, 21, 30 something, and then we don't mention anything above that. If you came to see me in private practice, I'd be dealing with exactly the same stuff. My personal view is that almost every adult problem has its root as well in our own personal ACEs. And this is something that's very important to understand. When we're talking about adverse childhood experience, sometimes we can get a little bit caught into looking for major drama. And we can end up looking at things which are very obvious ACEs. So, for instance, we might look like someone who has had an abusive childhood background, whether it be physical, sexual, mental, whatever it is that's going on. We may start looking at significant bullying incidents. We may look at incidents in the family, such as breakups or anything like that. And I know that when we look at our ACEs categories, we can slot some really horrible things into these things, some real life-changing moments that can happen when we look at our ACEs categories. But here's the thing, is that one of the ways that we view the way that our mind works is that our experience of the world is entirely subjective. Everything that you're currently experiencing is an entire subjective reality. What's a very easy thing for you to deal with might actually for someone else be a real trauma. For instance, in fact, let me give you a personal example. When I was in school, I became, as I like to affectionately call him, the lanky ginger kid with the specs. This was around about third year. I moved school just at the end of first year again, which was a kind of difficult time to move. I'd already moved school once, just at the end of primary 4 into primary 5. And you guys will deal with young people and children moving school all the time. But what happened was that around about third year, I grew very tall. My hair grew very ginger, and ended up needing glasses. And this brought unwanted attention. But it's one thing that is very important in this, is one particular person that I want to speak about. Because I actually think this guy was just trying to have banter. But I was getting bullied by two people in particular. It wasn't anything like, considering some of the stories I've heard in my time doing this job. I mean, to be honest, it was enough to affect me. And I was doing things like trying to pretend to be sick to stay away from school. I was doing all these different things. And there was one friend of mine who, I say friend of mine, he wasn't then. Actually, since then, we've actually become very mild friends as we've grown older. But back then, he used to have this thing that he used to say to me, where he used to say, Costello, your family, they're all clones. And I used to go, oh God. And do you know the thing is that, see, at the time, I would have seen him, I would have told you at 15 years old. And to be honest, if I hadn't done all the therapy I had, I might still say, yeah, do you know what? He was one of my bullies. But on reflection, I actually think that what he was trying to do was that he was actually trying to have some banter. To him, he didn't even realize what he was doing. And this is what I mean by contextual. He couldn't understand the grander context of the world that I was in, and therefore it was affecting me badly. And he couldn't have known any of that was happening because, to be quite frank, I didn't tell anyone. In private practice, I've dealt with people who have had, in fact, this story I tell quite frequently. One girl I remember dealing with, she was 15, very severe anxiety symptoms. I'm going to speak to you about this technique that we use a little bit later on. But when I asked her where it was that it all started, she had this memory. It wasn't anything particularly bad. Her family, her mum and dad had split up. There was various things that had happened that you would have gone, oh yeah, it might be that. But actually what it was that one day in about primary 3, primary 4, she stood up in class or put her hand up in class and she'd asked her primary school teacher, Miss, how do you spell CD? As in compact disc. How do you spell CD? That probably dates that client for a wee bit. Some kids nowadays wouldn't even know what a CD was. And the whole class laughed. And that was enough of a childhood experience, an adverse childhood experience, to put a thing in her head that at 15 was still there, that she was stupid, that people were judging her, that people were going to laugh at her if she got things wrong, if her exam results weren't good enough, then everything was going to go wrong. So this is what we're talking about. We are talking about children who sometimes, and if I could say one thing from my end, is don't always look for the really, really deep stuff. Sometimes it's surface level things, and one of the first things we have to do, I'm sure you're all already brilliant at this, but is listen to what our young people are telling us. Sometimes we think that as adults we know better. So the young person said to us, well, it was that time that I put my hand up in class and asked for CD. And what we're too busy doing is asking about the things that we view as trauma. So we say, oh yeah, but so how did you feel when your mum and dad split up? Or how did you feel when your grandpa died? Or how did you feel when this happened? Looking for things that aren't there. Now, I'm not saying that these things aren't important. They obviously are. These are things that can really affect young people. And one of the things we have to do when we're first working with someone on their mental health, adult or young person, is to be able to listen. And the more that we listen, the more that we'll hear, because our young people know our heads, or their heads, much, much better than sometimes we give them credit for. Just a little bit just to the side before I move on to something else, but I genuinely do believe that when we see young people, especially in private practice, and I've had conversations with many teachers about this. We've done one-to-ones in a number of schools. I mentioned the Lochwinnoch pilot that we're doing. That's only one of many schools that we do one-to-ones in, although many of them are secondary schools. But actually quite often, one of the things that we have to do is actually coach the parents, because it's us, the adults, that actually are the problem. We put the meaning on. Let me give you a little bit of background on that. So let me just recap first of all. What I'm getting to is that we are in the middle of what I would say is an anxiety crisis. And I think that what we have to do as teachers, as adults, as parents, as aunties and uncles and anybody that helps young people, what we have to understand is that our young people know their minds better than sometimes we give them credit for. And that sometimes it's us that ends up putting meaning on things, or trying to put meaning on things, and missing huge, great, big, obvious red flags when our young people are talking to us, because all of our experiences are subjective. Let me just give you a little model. I think there's somebody maybe coming on later on this week to speak to you about cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. That's not what we do. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But we share a model. And the model is that we believe often that we are being triggered by our outside world. And we therefore look to the outside world, especially when we're want to help our young people. We look to our outside world and we go, what is it that's happening? Where is this coming from? Because it must be something that I, outside someone else's head, can see. So I'm the adult, they're the child, they're experiencing anxiety. Let me look about the room to try and find out what it is that's causing it. But actually, that's not often the case. What actually is happening is that it's all happening in here. It's a mind thing. The reason that sometimes we find children and young people being able to experience an anxiety, if we're looking for a pattern, don't look for the pattern outside the young person. Look for the pattern inside the young person, because it's happening in here. The outside world, yes, is full of triggers. In my world, we call them anchors. It's full of lots of little things that are firing us off, but they are only as powerful as the meaning that we attribute to them. For that girl with the CD story earlier on, when she's experiencing people looking at her or people turning or a bad mark, her memory is rekindling, and therefore she is experiencing that all over again. And therefore what's happening is it's the thought that runs in here that then causes the anxiety. So it's thinking that causes our problems, not the outside world. And therefore what we're always looking to do is ask ourselves, how is somebody thinking? But before we get to that, they're really good at telling us 3 different things. And most people will tell you 3 things before they even get close to tell you how they're thinking. So, sorry, somebody else is phoning. I'm just going to knock that back again. Somebody is desperate to get in touch with me, but unfortunately it keeps on coming through my computer. I apologise for that. So they're very good at telling us 3 things. Now, those 3 things are, number 1, what they think might be causing it. So they look outside themselves and they think, right, what is it that could be this? But we've already talked about that. It's actually never really something outside ourselves. The next thing they tell us is what they've done. So they say something like, I'm feeling really anxious and I feel really fidgety. For instance, just using anxiety as an example. I'm feeling really fidgety, but we can see that. We know how they're behaving. We know actually what they're doing. So therefore, this is a common sign that somebody's on the right track. So if they're telling you this, this is good. The next thing what they'll tell you is how they're feeling. So they'll say, I don't know what causes it, miss, or I don't know what causes it, sir, but I just feel really funny and I feel like this. I think I'm anxious. And this is them telling you the third thing. They'll tell you how they feel. But that's actually not what you want. What you want is the 4th thing. And the 4th thing is how they're thinking. What is the thought that's causing the feeling, that's causing the fidget? What is it that's causing this to happen? Why are they upset? If they're sitting in front of you and they've got loads of tears and they're crying and all this is happening, then the question is why are they doing that? Now, they might be able to tell you, well, I feel really sad. The question is okay, but what's happening in here that's making you sad? If I could use an adult example for you, just for a second. And this might be true of some people you know. Obviously, nobody that's listening to this right now, but maybe some people you know. But to use an adult example for a second, we're in February. I don't know how your New Year's resolutions are going, but for many people, they'll have made a New Year's resolution that they were going to lose some weight once the new year started. I don't know how that's going. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you're super fit and healthy and you're somebody who's knocking it out of the park and it's fantastic. But if I was to ask you, well, what stops you going to the gym or what stops you eating healthy? What a lot of people do is they'll give you their logical answer, the front of their head answer. And they'll say something like, oh, nothing. I know I should just go, shouldn't I? I should just go to the gym. I've got my membership. But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the emotional answer. And the emotional answer is often, well, can you imagine me walking into a gym and putting on Lycra? Can you imagine what the looks that I would get because I've let myself go so much? Can you imagine how embarrassed I would be because I don't know how to work any of the machines? Can you imagine that I don't have the time? Can you imagine that actually it's not a priority? And this is what we're looking for. So in young people, quite often that won't make any sense. And I want to give you just 2 things that you can look at and look for that will help. And these are the 2 things. When I said earlier, we look for patterns and what's happening. This is what I would call our patterns, or the headstrong patterns that we go looking for. Number 1, when we're dealing with a young person who's dealing with extreme emotion, quite often it can appear as if there's 2 of them. This is no multiple personality thing. I'm not trying to say that our children are all somehow twisted and have crazy mind alters inside their head, but they can seem as if there's 2 of them. If you've ever experienced a young person with severe emotional issues, 1 minute they're sitting very, very peacefully at their desk, and the next minute you have an emotional explosion all over your classroom. whatever that may be, whether that be anger, whether that be anxiety, whether it be that actually one day they're playing with all their friends, the next day they're arguing with all their friends, and you can't work out how it's happening. It's almost as if there's like two different young people, as if you're dealing with two sides of them. The classic way to understand this is like devil and angel on the shoulder, that type of thing. So when we're looking at that, quite often what people do is they dismiss that. And what we do a lot, especially with young people, is we tell them to fight the bad one. But here's the thing. I do a thing called NLP. That's the main thing that I do. It was the thing I was trained in way back. I do a whole heap of other things now, but NLP is the main thing. And it stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, not that that's massively important. What we're interested in is, the way I best describe it is the mechanics of the mind. So whereas somebody like potentially a person-centered counsellor or somebody like that would be very interested in the story, we're interested in what the story has made different inside that young person's head and how it's now working. Easy example, young person comes to you, for instance, as a teacher, and says, "Miss, sir, my grandpa died about 4 months ago. I've not been able to get over it. It's the worst thing in the world. I don't know what to do, and my head feels funny." There is a tendency for us to want to get involved in the story. Tell me about your grandpa. Tell me about what happened, and how did that feel? And how's the family been? What I would say is actually more useful is, okay, so your grandpa died 4 months ago. How has your thinking changed since then? What is it, again, emotional answer, what is it that's actually going on inside your head that's different than it was before? Because that we can change, and that's how we get this split. Let me give you a little bit of a description of this. Everybody that's listening to this, every young person that you deal with, every person that you know is a decision-making machine. We are, every single one of us, a decision-making machine. And your mind has 3 ways to be able to make a decision. Number 1, it uses experience. I've done this before, so I know what to do. I'm going to do that again. Now, that doesn't mean that all your experience is good. Some of our experiences are rubbish, but we have produced a coping strategy that allows us to move on with whatever it is that we're doing in life. So here it is, I've got a coping strategy because I've got experience. But you're dealing with potentially primary school age children. They don't have all the experience they need. In fact, maybe you as an adult may be sitting here thinking, I don't have all the experience I need to be able to deal with this adulting thing when people keep on asking us to make these grown-up decisions. But definitely our young people don't. Now, the feeling that we get when we don't have enough experience, yet something happens in our world, is confusion. So we feel confused. So our mind goes, like that, and we get that pause where our brain feels as if it's frozen. What your mind is doing in that second is it's going looking for some sort of experience that it can use. But if it can't find it, the first place it reaches to is it reaches out and it goes, okay, I don't have the experience, but who does? Who has that experience? So it looks for a teacher, not a teacher, but a teacher. It could be anybody, mum, dad, friend, big brother, big sister, aunt, uncle, you. It could be anybody at all. And what they look for is they're looking for somebody to tell them what to do. Somebody who has more experience than me, give me your experience so I now have the experience and then I can move on. And this works 99% of the time. But sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we have no experience and no teacher. Let me give you an example of that. I was working with a young person last week who was 13, I think, 13 years old, somewhere around there. And both mum and the young person both knew that where we were going back to in terms of our ACEs and our adverse childhood experience, where we were going was mum and dad splitting up. And therefore, what we had was that we had a young person who had never experienced what was going on before. Dad was leaving the house and he was going to end up with mum in this single parent family. He didn't understand what was going on because he was only about 10 years old when this was all happening. And therefore, when he reached out for a teacher, the two people that he was looking for the help were the problem. So the two teachers that he was looking at going, help me, were actually the issue. And he found himself without teachers. So now you have a young person who's confused because they have no experience, so they reach out for a teacher, and then the teachers are just causing more confusion. So what happens? Well, they enter into confusion, but now what we have, and this is the key component, is now we have fear. And when we pour fear over confusion, the mind starts going, okay, I need to make a decision, I need to make a decision, I need to do something, I need to do something, I need to do something, and it shakes a little bit, and then it goes, oh no, we need to decide, and it splits in two. And what you have is a split decision, and we would call a split decision a dilemma. And now you have a young person in dilemma. So let me give you an example using this young person as an example. What you have is one part of them, a little voice inside their head. Now, this is their mind trying to help, that says to this boy, this is all your fault. This is all you. You have done this. You cannot make it better. The best thing that you can do is just to go away and hide. Because if you get involved, you're going to make it worse. Why? Because it's your fault. And this little voice is trying to protect him. What it's saying is the best thing to do is just to back off. It's the flight of fight or flight. On the other hand, though, you've got another side that says, I know how to make this better. Let's smile and make everything fantastic. Let's go and help. Why don't we go and see if we can make everything better? Why don't we tidy the kitchen for mum? Why don't we take dad's side? Why don't we make sure that everything's good and that we're the best boy in the world and that everything is perfect? Because if everything is perfect, then everything will be better. But it's your fault. And therefore, what you have to do is you have to go away and hide. No, but it's not my fault because I can make it better because look, I'm going to go out and I'm going to help everybody and I'm not going to put any focus on me because it's not about me. If I can make everybody feel better, then that'll be good. No, but it's your fault. No, but it's not my fault. Yeah, but it is your fault. So this part of him, what you now have is a boy who is kind and considerate to his friends, helpful, but when it focuses on him, he retreats inside. And when you try and help him, he doesn't deserve that help because it's his fault. And you get this boy who is anxious and unable to help himself. This is dilemma. And if you want to help a young person who is in this situation, I promise you that the last thing you want to be doing is telling them that one of these sides is bad. That anxious side, that side that's telling him it's all his fault, we get is totally wrong. It's not right. He's taken evidence and in the context, as we spoke about earlier, he's twisted it. But actually, what's happening inside his head is he's got a part of him that's trying to protect him. And that part, every time it retreats him into his room, is going, yes, see, I helped. There's a wee part of his head every time he sits in his room and feels safe and feels that relief when he closes his door and goes, oh my God, thank God I'm away from all that. I'm now on my own and nobody's talking to me and I'm isolated. There's a bit of his head that goes, well done, mate. Well done. Even though it feels horrible. Now, of course, what kicks in after that is what are you doing locking yourself in your room? You've now hurt your mum. And this is where the dilemma comes in and he gets pulled in these two different directions. So what do? We need to find balance. We need to help somebody find balance. And how do we do that? Well, there's a whole number of ways. We have this amazing technique, which some of you have experienced and maybe some of you know about, but it is so powerful. It leaves kids coming out with just the biggest grins on their faces, but it's way too technical for me to describe just now. But the question that I want you to ask as many times as you can is, why? What's it trying to get you to feel? So if you think about it, it wants me to stay away from everybody. Don't look on it as anxiety. Look on it as it's performing a job. What's its job? Its job is to make him isolated. Why? Because then I'm safe. And what are you safe from? I'm safe from people shouting and I'm safe from the hurt. And when you're safe from the hurt, how do you feel? Oh, well, then I feel relief. Now when you feel relief, what does that get you next? It might be just for a heartbeat, but it'll be right there. What does that get you? Well, once I feel that relief, then actually I start to feel calmer. And once you feel calmer, then I feel happier and stronger and more confident. So actually that part of you is trying to make you feel confident, but how it thinks it needs to do it is to isolate you. I hope that makes sense. It's a very, very quick example of something that's quite technical. I'll give you some resources at the end that you can go to and you can find out more about this. So When somebody's in a dilemma, don't fight it. Help them find balance. I promise that actually somewhere inside their head, if you can make them friends with that and understand it, all of a sudden it will start to soften and they might be able to deal with it a little bit better. I said I'd give you two things. How are we doing for time? I'll just cover this in 5 minutes because we've actually covered a lot of this, and if you've studied ACEs as well, you'll know how this all works. But we also do a technique that we call, the name for it is timeline therapy. It sounds very grand, but actually you don't need to know the technique to be able to use the theory of it to be able to help young people. The theory is that everything has a root. So everything has a beginning. And this is why I get so excited by doing stuff like this, by talking to people about ACEs. When I first heard about ACEs, it came out of nowhere, and I'm like, I was so delighted that people had finally started to work out that bad behavior or adverse behavior or whatever it was, these extreme emotions didn't just happen. They don't just happen, they have roots. And these roots are these childhood experiences. So the way that we describe it and what I do is that we imagine it like a big string of pearls. And what happens is that at some point in all our lives, everything has a start. Now, there's two different types of start. The first one is what we call a drip feed, or I call it a drip feed. And a drip feed is when something just keeps on happening. Again, again, again. If you were to tell me about one particular incident, it doesn't actually seem that big, but as part of something bigger. I've already given you a drip feed as an example. So earlier on, when I was talking about my mate and all that thing about, oh, your family are all clones, perfect example of a drip feed. When I tell you about that, some people will go, that sounds dead funny. Why do you all look alike? But as part of something that was happening every day, as part of something bigger, it was affecting me really badly. Drip feeds are a little bit more difficult to spot than the other one because they happen slowly over time. So people sometimes say, I don't know what happened, but I'm going to give you a question that will smoke both of these things out. And the other one is the complete opposite of a drip feed. The other one is what we call a big bang. Boom! Something comes along and just emotionally bangs. It just is a big clatter. It's like a crash. Now these, can I just say, can be positive. These can be amazingly positive things. Every single thing you teach a kid is a drip feed. The fact that they can now know their alphabet was learned over a drip feed. They'll also have learned big things, like they'll maybe have had big moments where they've won an award, which can be a big bang. It's like, now, I feel more confident and I feel better about myself because I did that. Negatively, your big bangs are what we tend to look for in adverse childhood experience. These can be things like splitting up, abuse situations, and all of these different things that are covered by all the categories. When these things happen, they change our behavior, obviously, because what happens is our mind begins to become generalized, and our mind starts to look and say, right, okay, the coping strategy is, I don't want that to happen again. So if I can find where that happened, then all I have to do is make sure it doesn't happen again. Let me give you one easy example. And it's actually an example of a drip feed, so it's one that's a wee bit harder to spot, but it will give you the theory behind it. Imagine a parent, and this tends to, when I talk about this in workshops, tends to get some parents giggling and squirming in their seat a little bit when I talk about this. This is my recipe for a perfectionist. Now, perfectionism is a form of anxiety. It can cause kids and young people some really severe symptoms. This want to always be perfect. But here's just one way that it starts. It starts with a parent turning around and saying something like, kid runs into the house and says, Mum, Dad, I got 9 out of 10 in the test. Oh, which one did you get wrong? Mum, Dad, I got second today in school sports day. Oh, who won? Who got the first place? Mum, Dad, look, I made a cake. Oh, that's really tasty, but it's sunk a bit in the middle. How did that happen? And what happens is that drip feed it's just not good enough. It's just never quite good enough. There's just always something missing. I'm going to always take your mind's focus to where it's always missing. Where's the thing that's just not quite right? And eventually what will happen is that the mind will go, I know how to keep this very important person in my life happy, be perfect. Some of you might have just found out why you are perfectionists. And now be thinking, oh my God, I have an adverse childhood experience. But for children, this could be a huge thing. Now, how do we deal with it? Is what happens, obviously, is your life starts to become that. It stops being just about mum, and then it starts to become about teachers. Once it stopped being about teachers, what happens is then it becomes about your boss, and then it becomes about your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend. It becomes about your friends, and you're constantly trying to please everyone and keep them happy. Why? Because your mind has been trained. Your mind has been trained to be perfect, because if you're not, someone will criticize you. What do we do as adults? We tend to turn around to our kids and go, well, do you know what we'll do? Let's move on. It doesn't have to be like that. Well, let me give you just one little story, a little metaphor. There's a thing in science called a Prince Rupert's drop. Prince Rupert's drop. Now, I personally believe that most people might be giggling because they think it sounds like some extremely painful piercing, but it's not. I genuinely not. It's a piece of glass. And it's a piece of glass, in fact, I've got one right here. It's a piece of glass that's about the size of this pen. And it has a bulb at its end, and it goes off into this long tail. And how they make it is they take molten glass and they drop it into a bucket and they cool it really, really quickly. So it makes this teardrop shape. Now, the interesting thing about why it's a Prince Rupert's drop and why it's not just a piece of glass is because the Prince Rupert's drop is very, very strong, like intensely strong at this end. At this bulb end, there's actually a video going around just now. Some of you may use the series Smarter every day in your classroom. If you don't already, go and check him out for science lessons. He's absolutely brilliant. But he has one where he shoots this with a machine gun. And the bullet, the bullet of the machine gun disintegrates because this little piece of glass is so intensely strong. However, at this end, at the tail end, I can break it with my thumb and forefinger. But when I break it with my thumb and forefinger, I don't just snap a little bit off. Actually, what happens is the whole thing explodes and the whole thing disintegrates. Why? Because the whole thing's held together by surface tension. Everything is pushing into this bulb end here. And when I release the surface tension, everything goes away. Now, how does this relate into young people's problems? Because us as adults tend to tell them, oh, it'll be okay. It'll be fine. You know it's okay to get 9 out of 10 in your test. You know you don't have to be perfect. Not all the time. But this young person has all of these experiences going all the way back that are saying, no, you don't get it. Yes, they do. And you might be able to dry the tears of one kid that turns around and goes, okay, I don't have to be perfect, or I don't have to worry that it was my fault, or whatever it was. But then the next day, all of these experiences come back. Have you ever wondered why it is that when you help a young person do what they do, and you help them and you think, we've made a big breakthrough, and then it all just comes rushing back? And it tends to be because all of this is still there. What do? Is actually we need to travel right back to the beginning. And this is the other thing that we help young people with. We have a technique, as I said, timeline therapy, which involves them doing visualization in their head. Any technique that has them revisit the younger them and teach them what they now know now that they're older. Does that make sense? So you're asking for a young person to revisit the younger them, the thing that we tend to not ask them to do because we're like, don't revisit the bad time, but to not revisit it and relive it, but to review it as the older them. For us, for instance, so for me, it would be like 45-year-old me going back and visiting 15-year-old me, looking him in the eye and saying, it's okay, big man, everything's all right. This guy's only having banter. He doesn't mean any bad for you. He doesn't know what's going on with you. And actually, he's not meaning to hurt you. And what that does is, in my memories, is it breaks the tail off. Now, what happens, therefore, is we get this big collapse. Everything, therefore, now starts to make sense. It's like we're reviewing it through a different set of eyes. Sometimes our problems become locked in the past. And if you want to deal with ACEs, I know it sounds horrible when you're dealing with some really horrible stuff, but in a very, very safe way, the ability to look back at it and learn something new from it. I'll just give you one example of a young person I worked with. They'd been through a relatively well, horrible family situation that had ended them up in a care situation. I'm giving as very few details as I possibly can here. And this little girl was very, very young. Yet when I asked her what she had to learn using this technique, she knew. Remember, young people know their heads more. I said, if you could go back and visit 6-year-old you, I can't remember the specific age, but if you could go back and visit 6-year-old you, what would you love to tell her? This wee girl by this point was about 10. And I said, what would you love to tell her? And she wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault. Try not to greet, by the way. I'm going to try not to greet at the other end of this as well. That it wasn't her fault. That now she had people around her that loved her and that she was going to be safe soon. And what happened was, if you almost imagine that that little memory just went, and that the mind didn't have to run its protection mechanism anymore. So therefore what happened was that she released the whole chain. And the feedback that we've now got is that she's doing really, really well. She's settled. And that things that I've got to admit that some people said that would take a long time to go away. I'm not saying by any means, by the way, she had this one session and it changed her life. I'm sure she's still going to have a little bit of reflection on that. And she's still got a lot of places to go and a lot of things to do. But it's made a massive difference to her in terms of being able to control her emotions, to understand where she came from. And you can do that. Classic coaching technique, for instance. Write a letter to the younger you. What would you say? And then take it out into the playground once they've read it out loud and rip it up and throw it in the air. Or if you're brave enough and you've got a school that can do this, set it on fire and let it all disappear. Let them stamp on it. Let them do whatever it is, as long as what they're doing is they're going back and they're looking at this thing and saying, this has finished and I'm snapping the end off. It doesn't have to be like that anymore. So these are our two main techniques that we use and that we're looking at when we deal with young people. And I hope that just by listening to these two things that you start to think about a different way of dealing with our young people when they're experiencing any types of emotions. So just to summarize, remember, every problem is contextual. Our young people are telling us all the time what's going on in their heads. And if we listen, they'll tell us, because our emotional world sometimes doesn't make sense. Remember the gym example? Yeah, we know we should go to the gym, just like our young people know they shouldn't have punched the boy in the classroom or thrown the chair across the classroom or be bursting into tears. But emotionally, I have these fears that sometimes don't make sense. I worry that everybody's laughing at me. I think everybody thinks I'm stupid. And you just turning around and going, oh, that's not true, isn't enough, because it's true to them inside here. If you can find out what the dilemma is, if there's two of them, then what we look for is we look for balance. Can we balance out the dilemma? And if we can, then that will make a massive change to our young people. And how we do that is by asking, what's its job? In a really inquisitive way. What's its job? What's it trying to do? A lot of our young people say, I don't know. But if you keep asking, I promise they're the only ones that do. And the other thing is to track back through time and absolutely go and find that ace, go and find that experience and look at it, but from that point of view of safety, of being older, and say, okay, what is that? And what do we now have to learn from it as a young person who's now a lot older? And if we do that, I promise that as a teacher, without any other training, just being a listener and somebody who helps them understand rather than fight their emotions, to understand their emotions, that you can help young people transform their lives. You could be the thing that helps them just release something. Our young people's heads are plastic. Imagine if you could just go into the classroom and be able just to be that person that molds them. I get that I'm very fortunate. I get to sometimes sit down with them for 45 minutes, an hour, and ask them questions. But just whenever you get a time, whenever you get 5 minutes, you've got such a strong connection with these kids as their teacher, especially if you're a primary school teacher. You're already 60% of the way there. Now all it is being able to listen. I'm just going to have a wee look just in case there are any questions. I'm nearly finished, so if anybody's got any questions, I'll just do a wee summary just for a wee minute. If anybody's got any, then by all means put them in. Nobody's asked any questions, but thank you very much for all your feedback there and that this is making sense to you. We're going to save this video so it's there for you as a resource to go back to, if that helps. And typically somebody is trying to phone me again right at the end of this call. This guy is desperate to get in touch with me, by the way, and I know what it's about, but he's just going to have to wait for at least another couple of minutes. I'm going to find out, if I ever do this again, I'm going to find out how to switch that off. Anyway, so we're going to save this video so it's a resource there for you. Phone calls and everything, we're going to be able to edit them out. So that you can go back and you can look over it again. If you're looking for a couple of resources, by all means, come and find us on Facebook. So we are facebook.com/Headstrong. I'll put it actually in the comments on this video so that you can come and find us easily. If you're an Instagram person, then we're Headstrong_Minds. So that's Headstrong_Minds. We do have a Twitter, which is Headstrong NLP, but I very rarely use it. And if you happen to be a book reader, so if you happen to be a book reader, I've got 2 books that you can get from Amazon. I don't actually have them. If you give me 1 second. I should have had these sitting next to me. These are actually my wife's copies of these books, but I've got 2 books that if you want to go onto Amazon, you'll be able to buy them. And that's Breakthrough Blueprint for the Mind, which is this one, if I can just get it out of the light. And that's about you and how your head works. And then the other one, even if you're a primary school teacher, I promise will help, which is Cracking the Teen Code, which you'll be able to find, and it's about teenage and young people's mindsets. Also, if it helps at all, on the 16th of March, we're launching this tomorrow. I'm doing a Facebook Live on my Facebook tomorrow. And if it helps at all, then we are doing on the 16th of March, it's called Calming Teenage Anxiety. If you or anyone in your family or as a teacher, you're interested in being able to come along and just to learn a little bit more, we'll talk about dilemma again, and I'll talk about some other things about how anxiety is made. Then it's running in the Village Hotel. Tickets will only be a tenner, and they will be launched tomorrow, which is I have no idea what date it is today. That'll be the 5th of February, just in case you're watching this back. But come and find us over there if that's something you want to do. Anyway, it's been lovely to speak to you. I'm just having a wee flick. And okay, so just very quickly, Johan has asked any advice for primary 1 into primary 3 ACEs. Absolutely, exactly the same things can happen, but just turn it into a game. You guys will be experts at that. So again, when I'm dealing with very young children, then they're very willing to go back and look at these emotional things. The challenge sometimes is that they're so mentally flexible. I think you might call it chaotic. That what happens is that you'll go, now I want you to think about this, and they'll go shiny thing, and they'll go jigsaws, and trying to keep their focus. So using the principles of these techniques, I would use exactly the same things. So I've got to admit, young kids love the techniques that we use for this. So again, just asking them about, and they'll get there very quickly. Their emotional vocabulary is quite limited. So therefore, you tend to get answers very quickly, answers like happiness. That's normally where you'll get to with very, very young kids. By P3, maybe starting to develop a wee bit more of an emotional vocabulary. But definitely P1, P2, it just wants to be made to be happy. And it's just about getting them to be aware of that. Their mind is plastic. So therefore, what I mean by plastic is it's moldable. It's not fixed like ours is a wee bit more as an adult. So therefore, we can make big shifts. When we're therefore coming on to something like the past technique, drawing pictures and then ripping it up, what would you like to say to that younger you? They honestly get it. I would love to go into more detail. Maybe that's something that we can do in a future one, is go into the younger children. But I've got to admit, for me, their minds work exactly the same way. The only difference is they don't have the social structure yet that maybe they'll sit and listen for long enough to be able to totally focus on one problem. Any, as well, just as a last thing on that, any metaphorical thing that you can do. If you go onto our Facebook page, as I say, I'll put it in the comments just as we finish once we've saved the video. If you go onto our Facebook page, you'll see a video of me. The name of the video is Rory Smashing It. And this is a little 7-year-old boy, Rory. And Rory had confidence issues, didn't want to go on sleepovers, all these different things. And we used the metaphor of him breaking a piece of wood and breaking a board, as this was actually the end of his second hour that we worked together. He'd actually just done the technique with the timeline therapy where we turned his mind into a spaceship and all this type of stuff. And I said, you know, only really strong boys can do this, and this will mean that you've got over it. And he drew a picture on the board. Actually, the one that you see us smashing is the second board, because I actually forgot to video the first one. And we got him to draw a picture of the old him on one side of the board, the new him on the other side of the board, and then got him to like put his hand right through it. And you can actually see him, the look on his face is just so amazing. He just looks so happy, and he kind of shows you his guns and all sorts when he's finished. So use games and metaphors, but to use the principles of the techniques. Nikki, yeah, in terms of would you recommend these two techniques for children who have had quite a sudden change of attitude? Absolutely. The sudden change of attitude is more than likely this happening. They'll be scared. That most of our childhood trauma is based in fear. So the chances are, if you can find out the fear, and I've just seen that Sarah has posted our Facebook address, so thank you very much for that. So Nikki, absolutely 100%. I don't care, I don't know. It tends to be a response to fear. It's a block. I'm just going to shutters are down, and I don't want to know. But if you can just, this doesn't always work, but it's a classic question. If they say, I don't know, the response is, well, if you did, what would you say? And this is a way of sometimes circumventing an I don't know, but it doesn't always work, but it can be a good technique. But absolutely, I don't care, I don't know tends to indicate fear to me. Yeah, 5 or 6 year olds with timeline therapy, again, very simple lessons, and sometimes you can help. So you can seed it in. So Andrea, you can seed in a lesson. What would you like to say to them? Like, would you maybe like to say that, you know, can you see that maybe they were surrounded by friends even though they couldn't notice? And then if they say yes, you could say, so who were those friends? Who was it? And then get them to expand on the idea. You're absolutely right. 5 or 6 year olds can find it very, very difficult to explain. That emotional vocabulary thing can be a real challenge. So it's sometimes about helping them develop that and being there, but as a guide, not someone who's guessing. Let them show you where it is, and then you just go and use your experience to be able to guide them through it. And yeah, I think that's us for the questions. I've just seen, Nikki, that you posted on your upper primary age. That's normally when that happens, because the younger kids don't tend to have that thing of I don't know, because it's not quite kicked in yet. I'll give you just one last tiny thing. Sorry for keeping you for so long, but if this is useful at all, there's an amazing model about how we grow. It might explain the difference between the ages. I'm not going to go into it in any detail. Again, maybe if you're interested, maybe a future one of these, because I love the opportunity to talk to teachers. Up until 7, psychologically, we go through a period called imprint period, which is where we learn the rules. Good, bad, right, and wrong. All you P1, P3 teachers, salute to you, because you get these young people and these kids with no rules, and you are actually a huge teacher of those rules, where you have to teach them the social norms. From 7 to 14, so from roughly P3 up to S3, they go through a period called role modelling, or just modelling, which is where they look up and the mind goes up. If you're a parent, you'll recognise this, because your 9-year-old will come home and say, James's mum lets him stay up till 10:30, why can't I? So this is normally modelling. They're looking, the rules that you taught them, they're now realising that the rules are different for different people. All sorts of aces can start to pop up here. The 5-year-old who is experiencing violence might not think, or might think that that is just their normal. At 7 or 8, they're starting to realise that it's not normal, and therefore that's when the emotions can start. And then finally, from 14 to 21, we go through a period called socialisation, which is about who am I and how do I fit in. But for many of you as primary school teachers, that may not be 100%. It's something you deal with, but maybe as parents it is. So when we're looking at upper primary school, they're at the peak of that modelling period, the peak of that thing where all of a sudden they're looking for people to teach them how to work and what to do. So always have a look at that supporting cast that's around them when they're up to about 3rd year, because it's vitally, vitally important. You probably knew that anyway, but it gives you a bit of a model. Anyway, so a huge thank you. I said to Sarah earlier on that, oh yeah, half an hour. I won't be any longer than 40 minutes. Apologies for keeping you for almost an hour. And I hope that whether you're watching this live, whether you've tuned in halfway through, whether you're watching this back on the recording, I hope that there's something useful in this for you, and that you stay in touch. Any questions that come up after this, come on to our Facebook page, drop us a wee message through there. I'm more than happy to help and chat to you about anything that this has brought up or any other queries. And maybe we'll see you on a course in the future, but it would be lovely to stay in touch. So thank you to all you Twinklers. Is that what you're called? I don't know. I've now named you Twinklers, if that's what you are. A huge thank you to Sarah for the invite, for coming on, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your ACES week. And it goes really well. Thanks very much for being with us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week. I'm Brian from Headstrong. See you later. Bye. Oh, I've not ended the video. I've completely cocked that up.